Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever or wherever you're watching or listening. This is the Stochastic NHL DFS Strategy Show, and I am your host, Michael Clifford. Last Saturday, before the holiday break, obviously, with Christmas on Tuesday, the NHL goes on a little 3-day break. So, 24th, 25th, 26th, no NHL games. Got to get our DFS in while we can. I lost power yesterday, just got it back late in the morning today. So running a little behind because I didn't really see any hockey last night, but I did see a bunch of people had very good nights in the Discord last night. First, shout out Clayton, $1,000 takedown in the $12 single entry. He went full Dallas power play stack. Had a Kiefer Sherwood and Jordan Stahl one-offs. They combined for 54 DK points. Obviously, those guys put him over the top. Cheap one-offs with power play time. Pretty good idea there from Clayton. So congrats to him on having a big night. Also want to shout out Hawkeye. Hawkeye, 10K takedown last night. He had Florida with he had a Florida 5-man stack with Wyatt Johnston, Kiefer Sherwood one-offs. Thatcher Demko had a great game in net for Vancouver. Obviously, Florida, that furious comeback late last night, down 3-0 with less than 10 minutes left in the game, tied 3-3, winning the shootout. Brad Marchand sticks a goalie in the nuts. Just, your classic Florida Panthers victory. But shout out to Hawkeye McNutt on that 10K takedown. And finally, I posted it just before we came on the air. Rock Hard Woody, it's a pretty good name. He also had a Florida stack last night, had Casey DeSmith in net. Thomas Harley in the utility. He had a huge game with a goal and an assist, 3 shots, 3 blocks. So congrats to everybody that had big nights last night. It is not lost on me that on a day we don't have a show, you guys have massive nights in the Discord, but congrats to you. We do love to see it. We do have 7 games ahead of us here tonight. A few of the teams that played last night also played tonight, Carolina being one of them, Anaheim being one of them. So, there is going to be some warm-up shenanigans, let's say. We always say pay attention to the Discord before lock to see what the newest information is. But we are here to break down this 7-game slate. So let's just jump right into it. Our first game is the Vancouver Canucks with a 2.5 total. They're going into Boston. Boston has a 3.1 total. Vancouver played last night. As I mentioned, Thatcher Demko started, had a really good game. So it's Kevin Lankinen tonight for Vancouver. Jeremy Swayman going for Boston. Now, as far as the goaltending matchup is concerned, it is worth highlighting that Kevin Lankinen obviously is not having a very good season for the Canucks. Comes into the game with an .877 save percentage. He has a negative 1.4 goals saved above expected. He was pretty good last year for Vancouver, basically until like the final couple months of the season, and then things kind of fell apart. The entire team fell apart, but Lankinen with a heavy workload with Demko injured just wasn't the same. Kind of the same thing to start this season with Demko injured. So Boston really does get a favorable matchup here. Boston is changing their lineup a little bit. They're moving Morgan Geekie off the top line down to the second line with Pavel Zacha and Casey Middlestat. Marat Husnutinov jumping to the top line with Elias Lindholm and David Pastrnak. I mentioned that because I think it's fairly important for this matchup. I was looking over the last 2 seasons. David Pasternak's numbers of 5-on-5 when he doesn't have Morgan Geekie on the ice. So over the last 2 years at 5-on-5, these are Boston's numbers when Pastrnak is on the ice without Morgan Geekie. 52 shot attempts, 2.1 expected goals, 2.3 actual goals per 60. Those are just straight up below average. Like not like below average for Pastrnak, like just below league average. Those are not good offensive numbers. Elias Lindholm is not the prince that was promised. For 5 years, I've said he's one of the most overrated players in the league. He's not going to lift David Pastrnak. Now, all that being said, this is still a pretty good matchup for the Bruins, right? Kevin Lankinen in net, not Thatcher Demko. Obviously, Vancouver still missing Elias Pettersson. They traded Quinn Hughes. Vancouver wasn't a very good defensive team this season to begin with. Vancouver also taken a lot of penalties. Over the last 5 weeks, the Vancouver Canucks sitting at 3.4 times shorthanded per game. It's the third most in the league. Only Boston and Nashville taking more. Over the course of the full season, Vancouver tied for the fifth most time shorthanded per game. Again, Boston taking more, but the Vancouver Canucks are taking their fair share of penalties. Now, both penalty kills have actually been top 10 in the league by their shots against and expected goals against metrics over the last 5 weeks. So the PKs themselves have been good, but this should be a lot. There should be quite a few power play opportunities for the Bruins here. Even if they don't draw a lot of power plays themselves, they're typically below league average in that regard. This should be one of those games where they get, 2, 3, maybe 4 power plays. With Lankinen in net, I do like Boston's power play opportunities here. Now, the thing is with the splitting of Pasternak and Geekie, now the top line has 2 guys on the top power play, and the second line has 2 guys on the top power play. I look at the Vancouver top 6. Marco Rossi on the top line, Connor Garland, Brock Besser. Whatever you want to say the second line is for Vancouver, whether it's Max Sasson with Kiefer Sherwood or David Kampf with Jake DeBrusk, they might play to a slow pace. I don't think they'll necessarily be very good, but like I said, Boston's offensive numbers, when Pasternak doesn't have Geekie on his line, they're just not very good. And Geekie's actually been able to produce well in the past without Pasternak. I mentioned it on the show the other day. 1.35 goals per 60 at 5-on-5 for Geekie over the last 2 years when he's not on the ice with David Pasternak. 1.35 goals per 60 at 5-on-5 would be like a top 5 rate in the league. He's better with Pasternak. A lot of people are. Just look at Elias Lindholm. But that's pretty good offensive production from Geekie in his second and, in secondary matchups. And that Boston second line is only 12,800. And because they get shutdown minutes, they get reasonable amounts of ice time. Like, Geekie might play 17, 18. Zaka and Middlestat between like 14 and 16, for 12,800, that's really not bad. I don't like making a Boston stack without David Pasternak. So if you want to take out Middlestat and put in Pasternak, that line set, that would be a Zaka Geekie Pasternak line, 17,900. Correlated on the power play. I kind of like going that route better. Casey Middlestat, he's having a decent season, but he's not really doing anything special. He's averaging, 1.1 shots per game. As soon as he stops shooting 30%, which he literally is, he's shooting 30% this season. I think his 3-year average is less than half that. I just think he's overheating. I think he can take out Middlestat and put in Pasternak, make it a more expensive stack, make it a more unique one, get it perfectly correlated. But you get the Zaka Geekie 2-man on that second line that is going to get decent minutes and going out against Marco Rossi and Brock Besser or something like that. I'm not that concerned. So I think that's the kind of stack I would use here from Boston. On the Vancouver side, I don't really have a ton of interest in the Canucks here. Now, on a 7-game slate, you shouldn't, just cross off anybody. But Garland, Rossi, and Brock Besser are 14,700. And I'm going to bring up this is a little Excel sheet I made using Top Stacks to kind of show where the mid-price lines stand. So the lines between 14 and 17K. At the high end, you have Nashville, Columbus, San Jose, Anaheim, all between 30 and 33 points. Then you have this Vancouver line below 26. Now, they're not getting a ton of ownership. Boston does take a lot of penalties. That is pretty important. As I mentioned, Boston taking the most in the league over the last 5 weeks, taking the most in the league over the course of the season. Vancouver does draw power plays. They're drawing the most in the league over the last 5 weeks. They're top 5 in the league over the course of the entire year. Power play itself, not 6.9 expected goals per 60 over the last 2 seasons whenever Quinn Hughes is in the lineup. so it's not going to be very good. But if they get 3, 4, or 5 cracks at it, maybe they can get there. I don't mind that Vancouver top line of Rossi, Besser, and Garland from a perspective of them being perfectly correlated under 15K against the most penalized team in the NHL. So I do think that there is some room there to go with Vancouver one at 14,700. Though they're not really a filler stack, which is kind of a problem. So you're not playing your Vancouver ones with Toronto or Carolina if you're playing the Hurricanes here tonight. So they're kind of in an awkward spot. I don't mind them. I think for me, it'd be more like 20 max or something like that. Like if I had one Vancouver top line stack in a 20 max, I think that'd be perfectly fine. In a single entry, I think in that price range, there are just other spots I'd rather go to, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. So for me, this is a Boston game. Like I said, I would go with like a Zaka Geeky Pasternak stack. If you just want to play the top line, hope Elias Lindholm gets there, I guess you can. But as Clayton mentions in the chat, he says leave Lindholm off your Boston PP stack. Seems like he's not a fan of him. I'm not either. He's due for some regression. So I would do like a Zaka Geeky Pasternak stack. If you want to just stack the second line, I think that's perfectly fine. Keep it cheap. They get, like I said, they get decent minutes. But I hate to make a Boston stack and leave David Pasternak off of it. He's just too involved in all their offense. All right, let's jump to the next game here. Pittsburgh 3.0 total going into Montreal. Montreal has a 3.4 total. Stewie Skinner starting here for the Penguins. Montreal's going with rookie Jacob Fowler. Mike Matheson is back for Montreal. So, the depth guys that might have been getting a little bit of ice time of late, notably Alex Carrier, might not get as much as they had. Matheson typically does play 24, 25 minutes a game. So, we'll talk about defensemen at the end, but it is kind of a blow to the depth defenseman in Montreal. But this is still a game with a 6.5 total with Stuart Skinner in net and Montreal favored. So I don't think there's really any defenseman on the Montreal side that I straight up wouldn't play. Now, Pittsburgh changing up their lines a little bit. Rickard Rakell dropping down to the second line. Tommy Novak joining the top line with Sidney Crosby and Brian Rust. And then they're reuniting the kid line of Ben Kindle, Rucker McGroarty, and Ville Koivunen. I'll talk about them. Actually, I'm going to talk about them right now because I was kind of surprised to see that Pittsburgh kid line broken up. I know they didn't explode on the score sheet right away, but they, it's one of those things where they did have that good underlying process you look for. Nearly 45 minutes together for that McGroarty Kindle Koivunen line, 81 shot attempts for, 43 against per 60, 5 expected goals per 60. Listen, in 43 minutes and 21 seconds of 5-on-5 ice time, they managed 30 shots on goal. Now, they didn't score, but again, they probably should have had 3 or 4 goals in that span. This is a Montreal team where, you get into the depth defensemen and the depth forwards, there isn't really a whole lot defensively to be worried about. Now, there isn't a lot of super expensive stuff you might want to play here tonight, especially with Jack Eichel for Vegas. If Tampa Bay doesn't have Kucherov back, he's a game time decision. We'll talk about that later. You might struggle for an expensive stack other than, maybe Toronto power play or Carolina power play or something like that. But, that McGroarty, Koivunen, Kindle line was really good in a small sample, even if they hadn't been scoring. They're under 10K. Kindle, you can just put him with one of McGroarty or Koivunen. I don't think you need to 3-man stack them, but that's a nice cheap stack. If you don't want to necessarily play them tonight because you don't need them, you don't need to jump down that far. I do think that's something to keep in mind as long as they keep that line together moving forward. Now, it's nice that they took Rakell off the top line. We'd mentioned it on the show. I believe it was on Tuesday, how that top line really hadn't been doing anything with Rickard Rakell on it. not just in his, recent 4 games since returning, but basically all season. Like with Raquel on the top line, 2.3 expected goals per 60. With anybody but Raquel, 3.3 expected goals per 60 minutes. Like, it's been clearly night and day without Rickard Raquel. Maybe, he was injured. Maybe he was playing through some sort of injury to start the season. We don't really know, but he definitely wasn't himself. And his play driving for Pittsburgh was amongst the worst of their forwards. So I'm not saying Tommy Novak is necessarily going to be the guy that, cures the top line or whatever. But it is a difference. And, as long as it's not Rickard Raquel there, especially with Novak down at 3,300 right now, he's listed as a center on DK. So it's a double center stack. That kind of sucks. But, that top line now is only 17,300. They're not perfectly correlated. But it's, they have a 3 total. They're going up against a Montreal team that has struggled defensively for good chunks of this season, especially after like the first, 3 or 4 weeks. And Montreal's been using the Suzuki line less and less in shutdown matchups since they put Zach Bolduc on the top line. They've been using Jake Evans at times. They've been using Oliver Kapanen at times. Suzuki gets enough ice time, he'll see a bit of the Crosby matchup. But if they stick to that, all of a sudden that Pittsburgh line is going to avoid Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield and take on a Montreal team that has been taking a fair amount of penalties all season. Like through the course of the entire season, Montreal 9th most time shorthanded per game. Still worse than league average over the last 5 weeks. The Pittsburgh power play, not as good without Evgeny Malkin, but still above average over the last couple seasons. So I honestly don't mind Pittsburgh 1 here at 17,300. Our top stack still has Rickard Raquel there, but they had one of the highest leverage on the night with Raquel there, 24% top 2 stack, about 15% ownership. The ownership will probably come up with Novak there just because he's cheaper, but without them being perfectly correlated, they might not draw as much ownership. I honestly do not mind Pittsburgh 1 here. If you want to, if you're in a 20 max, if you want to have like 2 or 3 of them, like I think that's perfectly fine. Pittsburgh hasn't looked very good for a little while now, but Crosby's still Crosby. Russ is still getting his a fair amount of shots off. So I honestly don't mind that new Pittsburgh 1 lineup. Pittsburgh 3, I think, is playable. I just don't know if you might have a need to dip down that far. On the Montreal side, so Caulfield, Suzuki, and Bolduc is expected to be the top line here tonight. 17,500, 14.1% top 2 stack, about 12% ownership. So a little bit of positive leverage. They're points per dollar, just under 1.9. So it's good. I want to mention this. Like Josh and I on shows a couple weeks ago, we're talking about how the top line had been struggling defensively, or basically at both ends of the ice since putting Zach Bolduc up there and moving Juraj Slafkovsky down. Now, here's the thing, is that when they moved Bolduc to the top line, once they got into November, Montreal had actually a really tough stretch of games. Just to go through what is like a 10-game stretch. Utah, Los Angeles, Dallas, Boston, Columbus, fine. Washington, Toronto, fine. But then Utah, Vegas, Colorado. So Utah twice, Vegas, Colorado, Los Angeles, Dallas, Boston, Washington. Like, it was a really, really tough stretch of games against, a few cup contenders and most of them being playoff teams. Since then, in the last 10 games where Montreal's schedule has gotten a little bit easier, 67 shot attempts, 4 expected goals per 60 minutes for that Montreal top line. And as I mentioned, they're getting more secondary matchups. So they're going to see a lot of that Raquel, Mantha, Brazeau second line for the Penguins. And, not to spoil it for anybody, Justin Brazeau, he's been good, very good offensively this season. All of his lines have been fairly weak defensively. That's one thing that we do have to mention. Justin Brazeau, Brazeau and Mantha, their expected goals against goal prevention are two of the three worst amongst regular Penguins forwards. So I don't imagine that Pittsburgh second line is going to be very good defensively. The Montreal top line has really come around offensively quite a bit. Even Bull Duke has been getting decent minutes lately, like around 16 minutes over the last 5 games. Suzuki, still hovering around 21 minutes per game. Cole Caulfield over 3 shots per game over his last 10. Pittsburgh does take a fair amount of penalties as well. They've actually been taking more than Montreal over the last 5 weeks, 3.3 per game. It's the 4th highest rate in the league. Penguins a little bit worse than league average over the course of the full season. And Montreal's power play has looked really good since they put Ivan Demidov back up there. Now, Montreal one's not perfectly correlated. They are coming in at 14.1% top 2 stack. Their ownership is probably going to be lower than Pittsburgh's. Now that Pittsburgh's top line is going to be quite a bit cheaper. So I prefer Montreal 1 here. I think they're very much in play on this slate. I probably, if you want to take Bull Duke off and put on Slavkovsky or Demidov, and save like $600 or $1,000, spend an extra $600 or $1,000. I think that's doable. But where Bull Duke is getting good minutes and that line finally seems to be gelling, I would probably just stick with the 3 of them and then add in one of Demidov or Slavkovsky if I felt so inclined. So I really do like Montreal 1. It's the only line I really like on that side. So for me in this game, it goes Montreal 1, Pittsburgh 1, Pittsburgh 3. All right, move it along. What a matchup we had next. Toronto has a 3.1 total. They're going into Nashville. Nashville has a 2.9 total. We don't know who's starting for Nashville. They never announced their starter anyway. But Nashville has a back-to-back. They play tomorrow as well at home. But I was looking through the course of the season. Every time, I think Nashville's had 4 back-to-backs already this season. Every single time. Saros has played the first game with Justice Annunen playing the second one. So I assume it'll be Saros here tonight going up against Joseph Woll. With Jonathan Marchessault still out for Nashville, Luke Evangelista still on the top line with Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly. With Marchessault out, Evangelista is taking his spot on the top power play unit. So that Nashville top line is perfectly correlated here tonight. 16,200, 13.3% top 2 stack, 14.4% ownership. Pretty good fantasy points per dollar, right around 2 per $1,000. Sorry. They have the second highest point projection of any of those mid-price lines, only trailing Columbus by a little bit. They do get used a little bit in shutdown matchups, but it's more like they go out against the top 6 of the opponent. Honestly, the way that these Toronto lines are configured, I don't think it necessarily matters. I was looking at the top line in their time together this season, 2.7 expected goals against, 70 shot attempts against per 60. The second line with Cowan and Tavares, with any other winger but William Nylander, 60 shot attempts against, 3.4 expected goals against per 60. Doesn't matter whether it's line 1, line 2. This is a pretty good matchup against the top 6 for Nashville's top line. And Nashville's top line, over their second half of the season, 59 shot attempts, 2.5 expected goals per 60. That's good, not great offensive production, but they are perfectly correlated on the power play. Nashville is drawing quite a few power play opportunities, 3.4 per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the 3rd highest rate in the league over the course of the season, tied for 10th for power play opportunities per game. The Leafs don't take a ton of penalties, though, so I'm not expecting a pile of power plays for Nashville here tonight, but it is notable that they have been drawing more power play opportunities here as the season's gone on. Now, Toronto's starting Joseph Woll, like Dennis Hildeby just had a really good game the other night, so I don't want to slander Hildeby, but Joseph Woll has probably been Toronto's best goalie over the last couple of years. 9-12 save percentage. I think Stolarz has been a little bit better just because he had such a strong year last year, but Woll has been the better goalie this year. It's not a great goaltending matchup for Nashville. At 16,200, I think my problem with Nashville is that, like, if you do want to play them with Columbus, like, you can do that. But, I'll bring it up again. We'll talk about Columbus here in a second. But the line total projection for Columbus 1 and Nashville 1 is about equal. The fantasy points per $1,000 is about equal. Top stack is about equal. Ownership share is about equal. Would I rather stack Nashville, going up against Joseph Woll, or would I rather stack Columbus going up against Peter Mrazek? Probably. I think that's kind of an easy decision for me, given how good Columbus's top line has been for the last 2 years, basically. So it's kind of my issue with Nashville 1. I don't think they're in a bad spot necessarily. I just think in that price range, there's at least one other line that I would rather play. But if you want to pair Columbus and Nashville together, go ahead, you can do that. No problem. So I don't mind Nashville 1 in a nutshell. I think for me, it's just that, again, there are other spots in that price range I would rather go to. Nashville 2, Haula and Stamkos. I guess you can play them. Michael Bunting is over 2 shots per game in his last 10, so he's chipping in offensively a little bit. That line is about league average offensively by expected goals at 5-on-5. But, at their price, 10,800, they're, pretty much a pure filler. They're not coming in with much ownership. That is the one thing that I will say is that they're coming in with under 2% ownership at a 1.1% top 2 stack. They'll get at the low end, Bunting will get around 14 minutes. Haula and Stamkos will get about 17 to 18. And it's not like Toronto's a good defensive team. If you get to some Nashville 2 in your 20 max or MMEs or whatever, I think they're honestly playable. I'm not running out to play them in my single entries. On the Toronto side, it's a good enough power play matchup for Toronto, if only because Nashville does take so many penalties. 3.5 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the second highest rate in the league over the course of the season, 8th most times shorthanded per game. So, the Leafs could get a fair amount of power play opportunities here. Both the Nashville top lines have been below average, but not bad defensively. It's not like the Toronto top lines have been, they've been above average, but not great offensively. Matthews, Nyes, and Nylander skating 18 to 20 minutes a game. That's good ice time. That's not really great. William Nylander, I honestly don't know what's going on with him. He had an 8-shot game on November 11th, and since then, he has 26 shots in his last 15 games, or 1.7 shots per game over his last 15 games, which is almost 20% of the season. You know what I mean? He has 3 shot bonuses in 29 games this year. To kind of put that into perspective, he had 3 shot bonuses in the month of October last year. I don't know what's going on, but he's not shooting the puck. Obviously, Austin Matthews' shot volume has gone down as well. At 22,000, that's kind of what's just doing it for me, right? Is this line has not been that good offensively. 2.8 expected goals per 60. That's good. Certainly not great. They don't get a ton of ice time. It's not like these guys are playing 21 to 23 minutes a night across the board. Toronto power play's been actually, the top power play unit's been fine. But fine for 22K, I think that's kind of a pass for me. Now, if you're playing a bunch of lineups and you want to play some Toronto 1 because, they do have very, very high leverage. That's one thing we should mention here. 17.8% top 2 stack, 3.5% ownership. So where they have the highest positive leverage of the night, if you're playing, even 5 lineups and you want to put in 1 Toronto, I think that's fine because, they are good enough still to just have that one big game where it all comes together. In my single entry at 22K, I think I'm just kind of out on Toronto 1. Toronto 2, they're playable, but even John Tavares, over his last 12 games, 27 shots. It's 2.3 shots per game with 1 goal. Cowan's played well enough on that second line. So if you do want to use Toronto 2, I guess they're in play here. honestly, I'm just not enamored with the Leafs. Like, if anything, I would play Toronto 1, but for me, that's more of an MME play. For me on the Nashville side, believe it or not, I think it's actually Nashville 2, using them as a filler to play, with your Carolina, or to play with your Tampa power play stack or something. That's about where I am. So I think it's Nashville 2, Toronto 1, Nashville 1. Despite a 6 total in this game, I'm not really loving any of the matchups here. All right, let's jump to our next one. Carolina Hurricanes, 2.7 total. They're going into Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has a 2.8 total. Carolina played last night. We talked about it at the top of the show. 3-0 lead with 10 minutes left in the game, and they lost 4-3 in a shootout. Brandon Bussey played last night, so I imagine it is Pyotr Chekhov tonight for Carolina. News on the Tampa Bay side, Brandon Hagel is out. Anthony Cirelli is in, and Nikita Kucherov is a game time decision. Obviously, a lot of people probably got burned on Kucherov on Thursday night when he was scratched with an illness after lock. Those things happen. It's what makes it tough to say what to do with Tampa Bay here, because we just don't know if Kucherov is going to be in or out. And obviously, he is a very important part of their offense. I was looking at Jake Gensel and Anthony Cirelli's numbers together this year when they don't have Kucherov or Hagel on the wing with them. And obviously with Hagel out and Kucherov a game time decision, that may be the case here tonight. 46 shot attempts, 2.1 expected goals for per 60. Those are really bad offensive numbers. They're probably, if Kucherov doesn't play, I mean, even if he does, but if he doesn't play, they might get a ton of ice time. Like, Jake Gensel played over 26 minutes in that game, that 2-1 loss against Los Angeles on Thursday night. Like, I had to double check that just to make sure I wasn't reading something wrong. But he played 26-45 in a regulation game. A winger playing almost 27 minutes a game, and not even like a Kirill Kaprizov or David Pastrnak or Kucherov type winger. Like, Gensel's very good. He's not one of them. Like, if Tampa Bay has to go 11-7 again, they don't play the guys on the fourth line very much. Like, Gensel and Cirelli are probably going to have to get a ton of ice time again. But like I said, the offensive numbers are pretty horrific when they don't have Hagel or Kucherov on the ice with them. So, if you want to get to some Tampa Bay 1, I guess they're Tampa 2 in the top 2 stacks, I guess. But, they're projecting extremely poorly. Gensel, Cirelli, Paul, 14,300, under 1.8 fantasy points per 1,000. It's a lot worse than most in that range. And they're coming in with more ownership than top 2 stack percentage. So negative leverage for a stack with a low projection and a fairly poor points per $1,000 projection. I think that's a no from me, dog. Braden Point down on the second line, I guess might be the top line. I call it the second line because I think it'll be second line by ice time. But Point, Bjorkstrand, and Gonsalves. I was looking at Braden Point's numbers this season when he's on the ice without Jake Gensel, just Jake Gensel. 59 shot attempts, 2.5 expected goals per 60. It's about league average. Now, they'll get some depth matchups. Point and Bjorkstrand both played over 20 minutes in that game on Thursday night because they did go 11-7 and they don't play the fourth line very much. So, they are volume plays. If you play Tampa tonight, it's a volume play, especially if Kucherov is out. Now, if Kucherov is in, if he goes and plays with Gensel and Cirelli or something like that, then I think that's a different conversation. But if Kucherov is out tonight, I really don't have much interest in Tampa Bay. They're coming in over-owned with poor projections. So I think I'm just out on the Bolts. Now, on the Carolina side, like, they don't have a very good projection here either. The 5.5 total is really hurting. Like, for all the lines, 17,500 and above, Carolina actually has is projected for almost 5 points lower than Montreal, despite being $3,000, almost $3,000 more expensive. Their fantasy points per 1,000 is horrific, 1.34. Now, because of that, they're not coming in with any ownership. But, the Carolina power play, I think they scored last night, but typically still hasn't been very good. Tampa Bay penalty kill, as long as Andrei Vasilevsky's been healthy and in net has been really, really good this year. I mean, at 20,300, I think that's just too expensive. This seems like a slate where I'm going to be more tempted with the lower, the mid-price stacks, the guys in the 15, 16, 17, even 18K range, and I will going over 20 for Carolina on the road in Tampa Bay. So I think I would probably dip down to Carolina 2 here. Ehlers, Stankoven, and Blake. For the mid-price stacks, they don't have a great overall projection, but at 14,100, their fantasy points per thousand is 1.72. It's actually not that far off from Tampa Bay, 0.06 points per thousand lower, and they're coming in with 1/3 the ownership. Now, obviously, they won't get the ice time, but the fact that their point projection is only 1.2 points lower for a third of the ownership, I think that's where my interest goes. It's Ehlers, Stankoven, and Blake. 72 shot attempts, 3.1 expected goals per 60 for that line at 5-on-5 over the last 10 games. Nikolai Ehlers, 4 goals, 4 assists, 29 shots in his last 10 games. Obviously, Jackson Blake has been getting some top power play time, doing that thing where they swap off with Jordan Staal. So for me, this is a Carolina 2 game. Like if you want to dip down to Carolina 3, I guess they're playable. But 7,800, that is super cheap. I don't know why you would necessarily have to dip down that far. I guess for me in this game, it goes Carolina 2, Tampa 1, Carolina 1, but it's really only Carolina 2 that I have a lot of interest here. And don't forget, this is a game with a 5.5 total, where we have a bunch of games at 6 and 6.5. So keep that in mind. Yeah, Jarvis is out for a while. I don't know. We'll see what they decide to do in warmups here tonight. Last night, I don't think they got very much ice time. I don't think they got any ice time with him. Actually, I'm just checking shift chart now. They didn't get any ice time with him in overtime. Like Aho and Jarvis only played like 10 seconds together. So I guess we'll see when warmups hit. Not sure. Like again, I don't know who's going to jump up. It really doesn't matter to me. There's, Seth Jarvis is honestly probably their best offensive player at this point, and it just makes things even worse. So, still out on Carolina 1. Moving along, Columbus 3.3 total. Going into Anaheim. Anaheim has a 3.4 total. Anaheim got absolutely stomped last night, 8-3 against Dallas. With a loss like that, and considering that they just had oh, you're fine, Tom, don't worry about that. Considering that they just got stomped and they had just shifted around their lines a couple times over the last few games, I imagine that happens again. That's kind of my problem here with Anaheim, is that this is a great matchup for them. They have a 3.4 total, which is tied for the highest on the board. And I imagine the lineups that they had last night is not going to be the lineup that they have tonight. We saw it very, very late in the game where, Alex Killorn was moved off for the very last shift with Carlson and Gauthier. Troy Terry was moved on there. McTavish and Chris Kreider played with Killorn for I think 1 or 2 shifts. So like, we don't really know what that Anaheim lineup is going to look like. That's both good and bad. The good part is that if they do have some line changes, then the combinations that you use are probably going to be fairly low owned. The problem is that Carlson, if it's like Carlson, Gauthier, and Terry, that line's 19,500. And honestly, I think that's a playable line at 19,500. And I'd rather play them than Carolina 1 or Toronto 1 or something like that. But if it's not that line, those are their 3 most expensive players. So, if it's like McTavish, Gauthier, and Terry, let's say, McTavish is $3,100 cheaper than Carlson. You might end up leaving a lot of salary on the table to make the swaps that you need. So, it's really hard to say what to do with Anaheim because, like I said, I am expecting some line changes. it's not like the lines were really going great, right? Like the Carlson line with Alex Killorn there, 2.4 expected goals for per 60. The McTavish line with Chris Kreider there, 2.3 expected goals per 60. Like they weren't really creating anything. I don't know why they would stick with this lineup. Maybe they add in Michael Granlund back to the top line or the second line or something. We just don't know what's going to happen. I think this is a situation where if I play Anaheim, I probably just make it like a late night stack. You know what I mean? So like game stack Anaheim and Columbus, play Anaheim with one of the Calgary or Vegas lines, play Anaheim with the San Jose second line, like something like that, just so that if I need to make a swap, and I probably will have to make a swap, we know you'll have lots of opportunity to change, all the players in the late games. I think that's basically the only way you can approach it. Like if you put in, Carlson, Terry, and Gauthier, but you have, an early like Nashville 2 stack with UC Saros plus Brady Shea or something, and all of a sudden, all of your roster spots are locked up and Carlson, Gauthier, and Terry are on 3 different lines or something like that, you're kind of boned. So if I'm playing single entry here tonight, I'm playing Anaheim, which I think is a pretty good idea considering, Columbus over the last 10 games, second most goals against per 60, bottom 10 by expected goals against per 60, bottom 5 by shots against per 60. Like this is, Columbus obviously not a good defensive team. Not that Anaheim is. Anaheim is one of those teams down there with them. But I do think Anaheim is in a pretty good spot. It's just, like I said, I think you probably have to make this basically a late night lineup. So game stack with Columbus, playing with Calgary, playing with San Jose, playing with Vegas, like something like that. If it is Gauthier, Carlson, and Terry, they would probably be my number one line on the board, especially where Boston and Pittsburgh top lines are no longer perfectly correlated. Carlson and Gauthier and Terry would probably be a very good line together. Now, obviously, they haven't played a whole lot here together this season. Like Cutter Gauthier and Leo Carlson have played a fair bit together this season, but not a ton. That top line would only have 32 minutes together, 78 shot attempts per 60 minutes. If you look at the numbers for Anaheim with just Carlson and Cutter Gauthier on the ice, 68 shot attempts, 4.3 goals per 60, 34 shots per 60 minutes. Like they've been really, really good offensively. It's just we don't know who the winger is going to be or if they even keep Carlson and Gauthier together. So like I said, I really would want to play Anaheim one here tonight. But if you do play Anaheim, I think the line that you stack with them is probably going to also have to be another late line, or else you might be leaving a lot of salary on the table or playing guys across 2 or 3 lines or something like that. On the Columbus side, Mason Marchment got traded to Columbus yesterday, and it looks like he's going to be in the lineup. We don't know exactly where he's going to slot. I was checking Daily Faceoff. They haven't projected on the third line with Charlie Coyle and Cole Sillinger. I think he goes to the second line with Sean Monahan and Boone Jenner. And then they leave the third line of Coyle, Sillinger, and Wood together. But that's another one where we'll have to see when warmups start. Mason Marchment not in the player pool, obviously. Mason Marchment is in the player pool because he is playing for Seattle. I believe the rule still is that as long as both teams are on the same slate, and Columbus and Seattle are on the same slate here tonight, the points will count for Marchment. I'll have to double check on that, honestly, and we'll let everybody know in the Discord. Columbus won, obviously, one of my favorite lines here on the night. 16,300, 14.3% top 2 stack, 14.6% ownership. They don't get Lucas. I mean, we should say I don't expect Lucas Dostal to start here tonight, but Lucas Dostal was pulled Lucas Dostal started last night. He got lit up. I think maybe one of the goals was his fault. I wouldn't put the rest on him. Dostal was pulled after 15 minutes last night. So I do wonder if they don't just go right back to him rather than putting in Peter Mrazek, who played the final 45 minutes of the game. Either way, Anaheim, certainly a below average defensive team. Anaheim takes their fair share of penalties, 3.2 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks, sixth highest rate in the league over the course of the season, fourth highest rate of time shorthanded per game. Columbus power play hasn't been as good without Sean Monahan. Do they have Mason Marchment? Do they leave Chinnikov there? I guess we'll see. But Columbus won over their last 10 games, 67 shot attempts, 3.6 expected goals per 60. Adam Fantilli over 3 shots per game over his last 12. Obviously, Kirill Marchenko plays 18, 19 minutes. Fantilli 19 plus. Even Voronkov's been getting around 17 or more of late. I really do like Columbus one here. I think that, the depth lines for Columbus, if you can play Marchment here, I think that's kind of an interesting play. I do wonder how many people are going to have, if it is indeed Marchment, Monahan, Jenner. I do wonder how many people are going to have that line combination because it's 12,200. It's a nice filler. But again, we'll talk about whether or not the points count in the Discord. So I do think Columbus basically has 3 playable lines here. It just depends what you want to do with them. I will mention that Sillinger Wood third line of Sillinger, Coyle, and Wood, 66 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals per 60. That is pretty good, playing between 14.5, 17.5 minutes. Cole Sillinger, he only has 1 goal in his last 23 games, but he's averaging over 2 shots per game in that span. So, he's definitely creating some offense. He's just not scoring, though he typically has a low shooting percentage anyway. I think they're fine as a filler, but assuming it's Gauthier, Carlson, and Terry, this is one of those games where I like both top lines. Anaheim 1, Columbus 1, probably Columbus 2, Monahan, Jenner, and Marchment, assuming that's a line, but that's something we're going to have to watch for in warm-up. All right, next game, Vegas, 2.9 total going into Calgary. Calgary has a 2.6 total. Akira Schmid going for Vegas. Devin Cooley going for Calgary, giving Dustin Wolf a little break here. No Shea Theodore for Vegas. No Jack Eichel for Vegas. Those are 2 pretty big losses. Shea Theodore, easily Vegas's best offensive defenseman. Jack Eichel, easily Vegas's best offensive player. Those are the types of guys that are kind of like the engines of the offense. Those are significant losses. If you look at the forward group and the defense group, those are probably the 2 names that you wouldn't want to lose. Calgary has been pretty good defensively for a while now. I was looking at the last 25 games. Calgary Flames, top 10 by expected goals against, top 10 by goals against, top 10 by shots against. This is a team that's just playing pretty good hockey basically since the first couple weeks of the season, at least on the defensive side of the puck. And, I imagine it will be Hertl and Dorofeyev that see the Backlund shutdown matchup. So it takes Hertl and Dorofeyev out of the running for me. They're coming in reasonably chalky. Hertl, Dorofeyev, Saad, 14,100, 7.4% top 2 stack, 10% ownership, but aligned with negative leverage. Going up against the Calgary checking line here tonight of Backlund, Coleman, and Zari is just a hard pass for me. So I'm out on the Hertl line. I was looking at Vegas's numbers when Mitch Marner's on the ice without any of the big 3, Eichel, Stone, or Thomas Hertl, which is probably going to be what Marner has to deal with tonight. It looks like he's going to be centering Braden Bowman and Ivan Barbashev. 54 shot attempts, 2.5 expected goals per 60. It's just not very good offense. Braden Bowman, after a hot start, only has 15 shots in his last 10 games. Now, he's getting some top power play time. And 2.5 expected goals per 60 isn't great, but at the very least, it's around league average offense at 5-on-5. And they're going to avoid that. I imagine they're going to avoid the Backlund Coleman line. And then once you get to the other Calgary lines, they're not nearly as good defensively. In fact, below average. So considering that Marner and Bowman are on the top power play, Ivan Barbashev plays about 16 or 17 minutes a game. That's probably the Vegas line that I would go to. Marner, Barbashev, and Bowman, 12,900, 2.2%. Top two stack, 0.7% ownership. Nobody's playing them. And it gives them good positive leverage. And that's not, you often don't get positive leverage for a depth line or, for a filler line, with Mitch Marner on it. So considering I think they're going to avoid the Backlund matchup. It's Calgary 2 or Vegas 2. I don't mind them in this game, whatsoever. On the Vegas side, as much as losing Eichel sucks for Vegas offensively, defensively, it'll be interesting to see what happens because Eichel wasn't having a great defensive season, well below average of the regular Vegas players this season, the regular Vegas forwards, 10 forwards, at least 250 minutes at even strength, second worst expected goals against rate. So while it really, really hurts Vegas offensively that Eichel's not going to be there, I think it might actually kind of help them defensively a little bit. Calgary 1, Calgary 2, whichever you want to go with. I will mention that Calgary's rearranging their power play lines again, and they're putting Frost, Huberdeau, and Coronado back on one unit with Rasmus Anderson and Nazem Kadri. Now, Vegas's penalty kill, top 3 in the all penalty killing metrics over the last 5 weeks, top 10 over the course of the full season. It's not like Calgary has a great power play anyway. They're drawing a fair amount of opportunities, but the fact that line is perfectly correlated at 12,500, top 2 stack basically coming in right at their ownership share. I don't mind Calgary 1 here. If you want to go to Calgary 2, they're a little bit more expensive and a little bit more chalky. And with this line perfectly correlated now, like I said, not a good power play matchup, but perfect correlation is better than none, which is what the other Calgary line has. So for me, it's Coronado, Huberdeau, Frost that I like a reasonable amount from Calgary. Filler stack, those guys playing, 16, 17 minutes at the low end, 19 minutes at the high end for Jonathan Huberdeau. So good minutes, cheap price. It's not a good matchup. It's a 5.5 total. They only have a 2.6 total themselves. Akira Schmid is in net. He's been solid this season. But for that price and the fact that Calgary's not chalky, normally, those guys are 2% top 2 stack with 9% ownership. The fact that their ownership is bang on. I think the Frost Huberdeau Coronado line is in play here for me. So for me in this game, I go Calgary 1, Vegas 2. The rest, I'm not really in on. All right, final game here. Seattle 3.0 total going into San Jose. San Jose has a 3.1 total. I haven't been checking Twitter since the show started. I've been just kind of scrolling right now for updates. I was just, the only guy that I was really kind of wondering about was Brandon Montour. I don't, whether he plays or not. We'll see. He didn't play on Thursday night. That might help the depth defenseman for ice time for Seattle more than anything, but we'll talk about defensemen in a second. I was looking at San Jose's top line. Macklin Celebrini's up over 80 minutes with Colin Graff. 51 shot attempts, 3.6 expected goals, 4 per 60. Celebrini over the last couple games, averaging nearly 23 minutes a game with Will Smith out. The Sharks do have their, injuries up front. Will Smith is out. Phil Kurashev is out. Obviously, Michael Mises playing in the World Juniors. So Celebrini getting a ton of ice time. Even Colin Graff up around 18 minutes. I'm not necessarily running out to play San Jose 1. I think this is a game, I hate to say it, where I would probably just power play stack the Sharks. So Celebrini Eklund, Toffoli, and Alex Wenberg. The three of them together, 22,100. Yadin Klingberg for 4,500. That entire top power play stack, 26,600. Add in Askarov, like you still have over 5K per roster spot left. It's just San Jose drawing 3.8 power play opportunities per game over the last 5 weeks. It is the highest rate in the league. If you look at the season as a whole, the Sharks drawing 3.5 power play opportunities per game, also the highest rate in the league. And we know how bad Seattle's penalty kill is. In Seattle, the other issue is Seattle's been taking more penalties. This isn't a team that typically takes a lot of penalties, like, in their team history. But over the course of the season, 2.9 times shorthanded per game. That's about league average. Over the last 5 weeks, 3.1 times shorthanded per game. So San Jose might get a lot of power plays here tonight, and they're going to need them because they still use John Klingberg on the top power play, and the power play is just bad with him. But the Seattle penalty kill is absolutely horrific. Over the last 5 weeks, that Seattle penalty kill clocking in at 67% penalty killing. For the course of the season, 69%. It's the only team below 70%. So it's a great power play spot for San Jose. A power play stock is not that expensive. You can still put in some good players around them. I wish San Jose would go back to Dmitry Orlov in the top power play, but we don't get what we want, do we? So it's a San Jose power play stack I like best. If you want to just onslaught them and add in like Colin Graff or something like that, I think that's doable. But it's a San Jose power play stack for me. On the Seattle side, like, holy hell. Listen, Seattle, no Jared McCann, no Jaden Schwartz. They just traded, and they just traded Mason Marchment. Those are like 3 of their 4 best players off forwards, at least. Certainly 3 of their 5. Like, this isn't a team that's super deep up front to begin with, and all of a sudden they're missing 3 of their 4, if not 5 best forwards. I was looking at Seattle's top line without McCann or Schwartz on it. 53 shot attempts, 1.9 expected goals per 60. That's for Beniers and Eberle. I mean, sure, they get a lot of ice time, 19 to 20 minutes. Beniers, 2.4 shots per game over his last 11 games, only 1 goal. But, he's shooting the puck. Eberle's shooting the puck a decent bit. They get a lot of minutes. It's not like San Jose is a brutal matchup. The thing for me is the Seattle power play. Beniers, Eberle, Tolvanen, Stevenson, 9.4 goals per 60 in their time together in 45 minutes. That's actually good. That's above average for a top unit. San Jose does take a lot of penalties. The San Jose penalty kill typically not very good. Like, if you want to do like an Eberle, Beniers, Vince Dunn stack, I think you can do that. I loathe to say it. I think you can even add in Chandler Stevenson or something. Stevenson typically not super productive, but listen, Stevenson is averaging more DK fantasy points per game than Beniers is, and he's $1,200 cheaper. And again, it's a really good power play spot for a Seattle power play that's actually been, and they've been a lot better than San Jose's. So like a Beniers, Eberle 2-man, Beniers, Eberle, throw in Stevenson, Beniers, Eberle, add in Tolvanen, like something like that. It's the power play guys I would focus on in this game, the top unit power play guys on either side. So for San Jose, it's Celebrini plus the second line. For the Kraken, it's Beniers, Stevenson, Eberle, and Tolvanen. It's those 8 forwards that I would focus on in this game because it is a really good power play matchup for both sides. And believe it or not, Seattle's power play has been much, much better than San Jose's. All right. Thoughts on Chernyshov so far? I mean, it's been like 3 games. I've only watched one of them. I don't really have much of an opinion on him so far. My opinion of him is that he's playing next to Macklin Celebrini. I think that's more important than almost anything. All right. So let's go through some defensemen here. Of the defensemen 6K and above, Zach Werenski, I don't think it'll surprise anybody, has easily the top projection, 16.4 DK points. The other guys are around 10. So, Werenski's coming in at 28.5 projected ownership. So he, might be 30 to 35% of some single entry stuff. in this matchup against Anaheim, I think that's still perfectly fine. Werenski easily the number one defenseman on the board. If you playing Pittsburgh, you want to add in Erik Karlsson, I think you can do that. Rasmus Anderson, still playable at 6,100 with top power play time, but he has been getting pretty expensive, like at 6,100. Honestly, I'd probably just try to find the $2,300 and go play Werenski instead. Going to the mid-range defenseman, the highest projection between 4 and 6K is Darren Radish against Carolina. He's still getting pretty good ice time. Jackson Lacombe, 5,700, better point per dollar value than Radish, and is a great matchup against Columbus. Lacombe, we mentioned it the other day on the show, but his offense has, really started to come alive over the last month or so. You look at the little streak that he's on right now. His last 14 games, he has 13 points. He's averaging 2.5 shots and 2 blocks per game in that span. So it's not just point production. He's shooting the puck. He's blocking shots. I really do like Jackson Lacombe here. Vince Dunn, the second highest point per dollar value of any defenseman in that price range, I think makes a lot of sense against San Jose. If you don't want to play a Seattle stack, you can just play Vince Dunn. Noah Dobson. Now that Matheson is back, I worry a little bit about his ice time, but he still blocks a lot of shots. So don't mind Dobson. I would probably rather play Dunn just because of the power play matchup. Jacob Trouba is getting secondary power play time for Anaheim, and he actually cost them a goal yesterday because of it. But I mean, he's on the power play. So it is what it is. Charlie McAvoy has a solid point per dollar projection, just under 1.9. I do like him against Vancouver. And I'll mention John Klingberg. He doesn't have a strong projection or a strong point per dollar projection, but is a really good power play matchup. And the team seems absolutely hell-bent on making it work with him on the power play for some reason. Just got to play the cards that you're dealt, right? For the cheap defenseman, Ivan Provorov is at the top. I don't think it's a surprise given it's a matchup against Anaheim where Columbus has a 3.3 total and Provorov is playing around 25 minutes a game. I do like Provorov as well. Matheson, he's not in the projections yet, I don't think, but he's going to project well in that home matchup against Pittsburgh, rather. I do like Matheson and Provorov just under 4K. If you need to get a little bit cheaper, Philip Hronik, 3,500, very strong point per dollar value for Vancouver. I'll mention Denton Mateychuk as well. If you, whatever reason, need to save 600 down from Provorov, Mateychuk playing 22 minutes a game for Columbus. A pretty big total. He shoots, he blocks. So I don't mind Mateychuk. Under 3K, Ben Hutton, I think, makes a lot of sense for me, considering the matchup against Calgary, where they're not going to have Shea Theodore. Mario Ferraro has a reasonable projection for San Jose. I'd never mind him as long as he's under 3K. Mason Lohrei, good home matchup against Vancouver. Probably not going to get a ton of ice time, but this is one of those matchups where he can kind of wheel around a little bit, and that's good for him. Jacob Slavin is kind of interesting here. We mentioned how Carolina was told, their coaching staff was told to keep Slavin's minutes low. I haven't seen anything about whether they're going to play him on the back-to-back, but his ice time has been climbing. I think his first game was 14.5 minutes. Second game was 16.5 minutes. Last night was 18.5. Does tonight get up to 20 plus? I mean, I guess we'll see, but Slavin under 3K, if he can get up to 20 minutes, I don't mind him. And Nick Blankenberg, he always projects pretty well for a defenseman under 3,000. Goalies. Number one for projection on the board here tonight is Jeremy Swayman, second highest value as well, 8,400 at home against Vancouver. That's the expensive defenseman here on the left side. I do like Swayman. I do like Joseph Woll as well, 7,800 going up against Nashville if you need to save some salary over Swayman. I think Woll is certainly in play. Akira Schmid, 8,300. Strong projection, but he's more expensive than Woll. But it is against a Calgary team that can struggle to score. I think Vegas will have to play without Eichel and Theodore. Will have to play lockdown defensively. That might limit some shots against. But again, Calgary sometimes can really, sometimes can really struggle to score. So I certainly don't mind Akira Schmid. It would go Swayman, Walsh, Schmid for me for the expensive goalies. For the cheaper goalies here, Andrei Vasilevsky has the second highest projection, and he's only 7,400 against Carolina. I think he makes a lot of sense. He's going to carry a lot of ownership, but I really don't care. Dustin Wolf had a good projection at home against Vegas. Now that's going to be Devin Cooley rather. But the projection really won't change a whole lot. I think 7,100 for a goalie on a good defensive team at home against a Vegas side missing both Eichel and Theodore. That's not bad. So I certainly don't mind Devin Cooley. And then UC Saros, 7,600 against Toronto. I mean, if you just hate the Maple Leafs like the rest of us do, I mean, you can just play UC Saros. But I think Vasilevsky and Cooley for the cheap goalies make the most sense. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Prospect says he hates goalies. Yes, we all do. Who are the chalky stacks today? Ask King Raheem. I mean, San Jose is going to be pretty chalky just because they have a high total and cheap prices. I imagine Anaheim's going to be fairly chalky as well. So I think San Jose, Anaheim are your best bets for like big time chalk here tonight. At least on DraftKings. All right, that'll do it for the show. We will be back, I think, Tuesday, because I believe Monday is a 3 or 4 game slate. It's a pretty short slate, and it's going up against Monday Night Football. So I think probably not going to have a show on Monday. Certainly going to be back on Tuesday. But Tuesday we might have to do the show in the morning. It's the last day before the NHL holiday break. I'm leaving in the afternoon to go visit family for Christmas, so wouldn't be around for an afternoon show. So we're going to try to get it done in the morning. So yeah, we'll probably not back on Monday. Certainly back on Tuesday. It's just a matter of exactly what time. Again, it'll probably be like 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Eastern or something like that. Thanks again to everybody tuning in over the last couple of weeks. Certainly not been a typical couple weeks. Hopefully things turn around a little bit after Christmas. But again, pay attention to the Discord. There's going to be some lineup changes here tonight. My hat trick pick, you know what? New guy, new location, new team, good matchup. I'm going with Mason Marchment. Mason Marchment is my hat trick pick here tonight. Thanks again for all the love. Bob says happy holidays. Happy holidays to you guys. I certainly will be seeing that again on Tuesday. But whatever you celebrate, whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, what have you, happy holidays. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday.